So I wonder how I say that this is the okayest thing ever. What's going on, guys? I'm Chris, and this is Regular Guy Training. Today, we're going to talk about the Palmetto State Armory Dagger. Now, full disclosure, nobody actually sent me this other than a friend of mine that already owns one of these, actually several of these, and he decided, hey, friggin' run the wheels off it, see what happens. If it dies, it dies, and I agreed, because why not? So this here is PSA's attempt at a Glock, and quite unlike similar polymer frame handguns out there where you got M&Ps and P10Cs and that kind of stuff that are floating about where they're Glock-esque, but it's their own take. This is pretty much like a Gen 3 Glock. Okay, there are some differences in there which we will get into. Do they cause issues? We'll find out. There's some differences between a stock Glock and one of these, and we're going to go ahead and hit on these. So let's go ahead and talk about all the stuff that I really like about this handgun first of all. Right out the gate, what you notice right away is it comes with a set of sights that you won't rip all the way off the second that you run this off of a piece of clothing or something. Good on them for shipping a set of metal sights on there. They could have really easily got away with shipping a set of polymer Glock-S sights on there. Save themselves a little bit of money as far as manufacturing process, charge the same amount of money, and people would have picked these up regardless. But good on them for providing a good set of sights out the gate. I'm not a huge fan of 3-dot sights, but can I really complain? It's a $300 pistol. There's also like night sight variants out there, optic ready variants, that kind of thing. And that's another thing too that I really do appreciate about this is that right out the gate, they came out with a bunch of variants as far as like full size, compact, Glock 19 size guns, all that, and sub variants to all those, so you can doodad and put these together the way that you want to. On the cheap. So I can't really fault them for that thought process. It deals with modern times, and I can dig that. Moving a little bit further down, we have a M&P-esque hinge trigger, or hinge style trigger. So there isn't like a dingus in the center of it. Very much like an M&P. When you start to press on the trigger shoe, it hinges itself out of the way. Is this an issue in the way that, like Gen 1 M&Ps had with their hinge trigger, where they were just very, very sloppy? Me personally, no. There's a bunch of just garbage air in there, like every polymer frame pistol ever. And then once you get to that wall and you start to press through the weight that's stacked at this point, it's actually pretty nice, because once it hinges out all the way, you almost have a flat face on there. So, is it a flat face? No, fuck no. But it's not too bad. It's got a nice wide shoe in there too, so that you don't have to worry about where exactly you place your trigger finger pad or any of that nonsense in the first place. It's for me anyway, it's very natural. You just set it there and you can press right through it. There's no problem. Now, as far as your controls, now this guy right here, super duper sharp, very Gen 3-esque. I don't really have much of a problem with it if I'm shooting this thing left-handed, because, it's just not in there all that much. You can't really get your digits in hard enough. I mean, you really got to press through your middle finger, and it doesn't want to go anyway. It's not like, for instance, a lot of M&P 2.0s or just regular M&Ps that I've shot in the past, where if you leave this on right-handed controls. They're reversible, and so I have a traditional magazine release, and then you grip real hard, you can eject magazines, which I can't figure out any instance where I would have to grip the gun extra hard at all. That for me is a problem. It's not so on this, and I've shot enough volume and I've shot it fast enough to where, and I've really gripped the shit out of this pistol. I tend to vice, but just to make sure, I gripped real hard with just my hands to make sure that isn't a concern. It's not. It does take factory Glock magazines, which is actually pretty dope. Here's the thing. They wiggle. I'm not going to say a little bit more than a Glock magazine does in a Glock. They wiggle significantly more. Now, is that an issue? Factory magazines? No. With Magpul style magazines, I was told, and then I saw it happen to me, a Magpul magazine shaken free, because those are sloppy, crappy magazines in the first place, but there aren't enough of them around to actually put out the word. This gun basically wholeheartedly rejects the heavier the worse. Meaning if it's loaded all the way, the worse your issue is, because it's just got more, momentum in its movement to shake free and fall out of the friggin' handgun. So it openly rejects the crappier magazines, which, as long as they retain the factory magazines, that's fine, A, and 2, you really shouldn't be buying those magazines anyway. They're trash. So there's that, right? Unfortunately, it ships with them. So if you're going to get one of these, buy the factory Glock magazines and do what you should have done, or what you should do anytime that you have Magpul Glock mags, and that's huck them in the next nearest tree line and don't worry about it, unless you just want problems. Which, if you're at a class and you want to create some problems, I get that. So, next thing here, this is actually kind of cool. There's a little bit, not a ton. It's smoothed out here, so it's not really like a undercut, really. It's just smoothed out and cut out just a little bit to where I actually really dig it. It sits very naturally for me personally. I haven't heard any real complaints about how it just likes to sit when a gun's recoiling and that kind of stuff. However, because there are sharper control faces, and because the trigger guard itself, you don't even really notice it until you start shooting a lot, but then after a while you notice it. Because it isn't really as rounded as Glock stuff is, you notice that it rubs on you extra hard. My buddy Cody, that I asked to shoot this for a whole class set when I was in Georgia, you notice like right away he's taped up in a bunch of different places, and a lot of guys do that even with their Glocks, right? But he taped up like right away, and it started to rub on him in the wrong places. It started to get sharp, and there's a couple other things that are a little bit less refined, and that is, for instance, just the corners on this guy are significantly sharper and just not anywhere near as rounded, for instance, like a stock Glock, right? And you start to notice that because when guys start getting really aggressive, or when they have not baby width digits like I do, because I need like a medium glove in order to work right. I can't ever get a small or a medium. I need like the in-between. And it's just how life goes for me. For me, that's not really an issue, but guys that have like normal human-sized hands, they start getting rubbed up. They start getting rubbed on. They start really noticing those sharper surfaces a lot faster. So it's less refined to a significant degree in that regard, because shooting this thing in volume starts to hurt people. So not exactly the greatest thing ever. That said, I kind of really dig... Well, also, they try to avoid how sharp this friggin' slide is, and they really try to get people out of getting Glock bit by this thing by throwing in a little bit of a beaver tail in there. Does it work all that well? I don't get Glock bite, but other guys do, and it's not exactly the greatest ever at stopping that, but there is a little bit of a beaver tail in there to pull you away just a little bit from the sharper corners of that slide. So, it is what it is. But not getting any flared mag wells or anything like that. It is a little more boxy. Is that really that big of a deal? No, get good, you're fine. But if you have a magazine well on like your Glocks or whatever, or if you already have like a Magpul carry mag well, you're gonna fumble it a couple of times. Like, it's going to happen. You're gonna do it. But after you get acquainted with it, you're like, okay, this is the box. I got to put a box inside of a really square box. It's really not that big a deal. So, that is what it is. Rail on this guy is 1913, I believe. Whatever. I didn't get extra movement. It wasn't sloppy. I didn't have white lights kick flipping off of handguns. That worked just fine. So, realistically speaking, there's that. Now, there is a concern for me, though. There's a concern as far as construction of handgun that I don't have a ton of faith in personally. Now, this guy right here, what's in here is a single coil. I guess I can call it a friggin' spring pin or whatever guys want to call those pins. It hasn't happened in this particular handgun, okay? But I have heard from people that own these guns and the guy that actually owns this one that having these pins that hold all this crap in here, so you can see, having this pin start to walk on them is not the most uncommon thing ever. It's not like, oh, you get this and this is definitely happening, but it is a thing that does happen to these handguns. And really the solution to that is just put, like an MMP, if you got one, go look at it right now, or a P10C, go look at it right now. There's a multi-coil spring pin in there instead of like a single coil, like 1 penny cost pin that's in there. We got a set of metal sights, just throw a slightly better pin in there, and that deletes my concern. Because the whole time that I'm running this thing, and I shot like 6,000 rounds through this thing, 2,100 of which were shot by my buddy Cody, the rest were by me. I looked at it a lot, and I checked on it, a lot, and it didn't really have any issues whatsoever. As far as the pin walking in either direction, it didn't move the whole time. Oh, and here's another thing too. I did not clean this damn thing the entire time that I shot it. Okay. Now, the reason why the finish doesn't look really hardly all that worn is because it's covered up by this friggin' nonsense in here. Okay, as you could probably tell, there's a lot of junk in here from just repeated use of this guy over and over again. And if the only problems that I would ever really have as far as its functionality are concerned stem from me buying like trash ammo nobody's heard of, because that's what everyone's buying to train with right now. So, I mean, yeah, even on the front end of this thing, it's not tan anymore. Oh, and while I've got this pointed at a camera, that's kind of cool. It's got a friggin' crown on it. I don't know why you have a 1 penny friggin' pin in here, but you have a friggin' crown on this thing so it can actually protect itself a little bit from like impacts and crap like that. That's neat. Okay. So the bottom line here is that, is it accurate? Yeah. Is it reliable? We'll friggin' see. 6,000 rounds for a modern modified Browning action auto pistol with a polymer frame on it is not a lot. It's just not. I'm going to continue to put ammo through this. I'm going to continue having students shoot this so that we can accelerate its round count and that kind of stuff. There's a couple of different places that I can think of right now that I can just be like, here, go shoot this. And they'll be like tight because, at this point we're starting to build a cult rather than a schoolhouse. But point is that, man, I hate how well this thing is doing. I hate how well this thing is doing because while people are sitting there hearing about, the PSA Dagger and that kind of stuff, the just as good memes are coming all the way out. And they're like, oh, just as good, blah, blah, blah. And in a bunch of ways, you can absolutely tell it's not as refined at all as, a Glock 19 or anything made from, actual Glock, right? However, they're on to something. This is the initial review. 6,000 rounds like a good handshake with a handgun. But so far, I guess you can call this the initial impressions review now because I do everything in extended format at later points. So far, over the last 6,000 rounds, I'm happy with it. Now, the question comes up when it's like, hey, do you hold it to the same standard that, like a almost $600 pistol, almost twice its cost would be? And that is, yeah, I'm going to hold it to the same standard, because honestly, if you're carrying the thing on a day-to-day basis, you absolutely should. Okay. What this is that it's, at least from the initial impression, it looks like a solid start into, self-defense handgun stuff. But there is a problem. There's a rather large problem. Now, I'm assuming that in order to avoid a friggin' lawsuit and that kind of stuff, they had to change up dimensions of things ever so slightly. This does cause a couple of issues, because, this whole time you've been sitting here listening about this thing, and guys are like, well, I can pick up a couple of these, no problem, right? I've spent more money on slides. Well, here's an issue. Okay, that's a Ragnarok, and right away there are compatibility issues. This slide is very square cut, right? And I believe, at least from what it looks like, that the upper edges of this are just a little too tall. They're a little too tall, they're a little too square, because getting into like a really tough Kydex holster, it's kind of a pain in the ass. Getting into an ALS, actually getting in there, you have to push this thing in there to the point where it's going to try and push itself out of battery. Getting it out of an ALS is not that big of a deal, but getting it in there is like a concerted effort to holster that thing. Now, the T1C that's on my body is very used. It's very, very used. Okay, so it goes in there, right? But if you have a good quality newer holster, especially like outside the waistband stuff that tends to be made out of thicker material, you're not going to have a ton of compatibility. And I've noticed this a lot just over the years. The higher quality the pistol, the less you can get away with, right? And really, that's not a downing on the quality of like the holsters themselves, because they're form fit for the guns they're made for. Okay, this is a almost Glock. Okay, I'm not gonna call it a Wish.com Glock because it fucking works, but you can certainly tell where I'm going with this, right? You really got to pay attention to what it is that you're trying to fit this holster into. And like I said, holster compatibility issues are gonna be a thing. So I hope that because PSA is very iterative on everything that they do, I really hope that when they do like their next generation of these, that they round these corners off a little bit more, because you're gonna have a hard time selling a shitload of these if they're not fitting inside of Glock holsters, right? Because that's an issue with a lot of people that go to a lot of different handguns, is that like it's not just buying the gun, it's all of the supporting equipment that go with it, mainly holsters, right? And a lot of guys are not like me, where they don't have a sock drawer full of nothing but a billion different guns holsters. They'll formulate all their stuff around a pattern gun, right? So I would suggest that before you go to pick one of these things up, like if you see it in a shop someplace and then you want to go buy online somewhere or whatever, right? Test fit these holsters. Make sure that the one that you use to carry every day actually works. And I mean, I don't get a lot of that. This fits really nice in there. I get some press when I insert that in there, because you can tell it's just shaving away some material. And if I were to carry this too terribly long, I already know I'd have to tighten up the tension on this T1C holster. Okay, so beware on that. Okay, in addition, okay, and I missed one thing as far as controls are concerned. And this is actually a giant positive. I love this. It's very, very, very out of my way. My grip can be very aggressive on either side of the handgun, and it's going to lock itself to the rear. Also, it's really easy to depress on either side. You guys saw me do a bunch of lefty reloads. If it's really stubborn, the lefty reloads are very, very difficult to do. So I'm actually very happy that they've achieved that balance of get out of my way, but there's enough little tiny shelf in there to get, instead of it being like a Shields or something that's really stubborn and it's super out of the way, so it's basically possible to where you have to do that all the time. But so there's definitely pros and cons to this thing. It's significantly cheaper, but that does come with its own cost. Okay, because if I don't know what they're going to do as far as holsters and that kind of stuff. If I were them, I would just iterate on this, round those corners a little bit, make sure they fit like every mainline Glock holster on the planet, and then ship them as like the Gen whatever, because we'll see, right? But I highly suggest that if you're going to pick one of these up, if you're going to start experimenting because you're bored and you already have your Glock or whatever, pay attention to what holsters these fit. Okay? If you have an ALS, you're fine. It's just tight. If you got a Ragnarok, that's not friggin' happening. Even on, for instance, Cody's, he loosened his up to the point where, like, there's just stuff wiggling around. And, I mean, to press it in, to try to get it to lock into place, it's pushing itself out of battery, and it still wasn't all the way in there. So it's just not going in that, for instance. So check out what you're doing and be smart. But other than that, guys, if you want to support us through Patreon, you absolutely can. You guys have been absolutely kicking ass as far as that support is concerned. If you want to throw us a couple of bucks just to help out the channel, get a couple of extra beans so I can come out here, shoot more, evaluate more equipment, because there is a bunch of stuff on the pipeline. I got optics from, with ACSS in the friggin' title that I gotta take care of, to include a magnifier with some range-finding stuff in it. Cool. So there's that. If you want to get something out of it, $41 a month gets you as much training as you want to, unless the class that I'm putting on is a logistical nightmare as far as just expense. For instance, like a vehicle class. I do private courses now. Just logistics of that. The $41 a month doesn't cover that either. But, that's a private course, so duh. If you want to, reach out to me for that kind of stuff, because I've opened that up and you guys are chewing up a lot of my time. This is good. Let me know what's what. Contact information is on the website, regularguy.training, which is in the link in the description below, along with our Patreon stuff and along with our Facebook stuff if you want to follow us there. That said, though, remember, guys, Regular Guy's firearm is the last defense against tyranny. Be easy.